Audible. Akhil, also please turn on the live stream.
I'll start
Yes,
presenting.
happened.
Yeah. Sari, are you there?
Yeah, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So good morning, honorable present.
Actually, your voice is coming very muffled. Maybe you can come closer to the laptop.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, yes. Now you're audible.
So good morning, one and all present here.
No, I can't hear her properly.
Yeah, neither can I.
Give me a minute, please.
It's still not audible enough.
Yeah, she's connecting from other device.
Okay.
Request the participants to make it fast.
Yes.
Am I audible now? Hello?
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
No,
Can we start?
not audible.
You can present.
Now?
Not really. I think Parul shayad sunti hogi because she has earphones.
No,
Headphone.
even with that.
Oh, you also have. You too have. Okay.
I'll suggest the other participant to please start with the jury presentation.
All
Yeah,
right.
am I audible now?
Yeah.
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 It is better. Yes.
Yes.
So good morning, one and all present here. So starting out with, so the site we have selected is a international pupil tree, which is in Bellary, Karnataka, having a built-up area of 2,840 square meter. So starting out with the context in architecture. So context, it refers to both immediate and broader setting of the site, which leads to contextual design that germinates from the native soil with resilient contemporaneous that can acclimatize to the future. So we have tried to show how the build structure and the context are interdependent on each other in the following sketches. So the various factors that causes the change in the context resulting in vernacular architecture, and how the vernacular architecture loses its essence due to the various factors. Further coming on to our interpretation of infill architecture. So infill architecture is something which is connected to where and when it was built. Infill architecture refers to what is already present. It could be in form of vernacular structures, shared spaces, communal architecture, or one deriving from sensitivity and the need of people through intangible elements. Furthermore, we identified various structures, that is the schools in the proximity towards a site which does not respond to the context and they lack interactive spaces, while the pupil tree which we have selected was built and designed keeping in mind the various factors which were responding to the context. So pupil tree is an international school built and designed with the aim to respect mother nature. Instead of being a high-rise building, it stretches on the land and the outskirts of the city amidst the farmland. Its free-flowing landscape and the use of local vegetation makes it fit for the immediate context around. So relating it to the past, like the Pupil Tree Academy is an example of infill architecture as we could identify, and it blends seamlessly with the surrounding in terms of more intangible aspects than the tangible ones. It has various type of open spaces amidst the nature. So classrooms and other are more encouraged to have informal gatherings in terms the way the school is designed. Furthermore, to the next sheet, we have justified infill architecture responding to the various elements which we categorize further aside into. So coming to the natural context, the school has been designed with sensitivity, uh, keeping in mind the local vegetation around. It also shows local relevance in terms of vernacular architecture of Karnataka, such as the indigenous guttu houses which is present there. So they have also incorporated courtyards, which is a vernacular feature of these houses, and they are centrally placed to provide proper light and ventilation to all the spaces, which ensures cross ventilation through perforations which are present in the interiors. Also, we could identify like the art and cultural lens, through art and cultural lens, the various elements which are used inside a structure. So various elements such as are incorporated into the design,
Yes.
such as rangoli made up of stones which are started on the floors.
ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ.
So the media of
ಹಾ,
expression is
ಗೊತ್ತು ಸಿಕ್ತು.
but the cultural relevance
Okay,
still
thank you.
prevails, and the various elements like the dwarpal. So these were during the historical times. Those are also incorporated inside the structure. So these are the various small elements which shows the cultural relevance which is there inside our structure. So coming to the use of technology and the materials which they have used, the architect has designed and used the stones, bricks, and muds which are local to the region, and also the local craftsmanship can be easily seen by the various aspects inside the structure. So one of the example is the interior roof, which shows construction details and perforations in the form of jali windows that are provided on the facade for cross ventilation. And the other aspect is also the scale and proportion. So the structure is well designed, keeping in mind the function of the users. So users for the students. So designers serves the students, accommodating the not accommodating the standard dimensions, but also but the design serves the student to their needs, since the classrooms are designed in to their level rather than accommodating to the standard dimensions which is already present. So coming to the form development of a site, so the form development is such that the clusters are placed with respect to the function. Furthermore, the divisions of clusters are according to the hierarchy of spaces, and then there's placement of courtyard and openings according to the sun path and wind direction, catering to the local climate of the region.
So as we enter into the site from northwest, the first structure is the outhouse, which is the administrative department along with that is the watchman cabin. Moving ahead, there is the Sarvapalli and Pramila, which are high school blocks, and the canteen, which is further within. The horseshoe arch ahead acts as an entrance gateway for the pre-primary, primary, and secondary sections. Then towards the left, we have Sangama, which is the administrative department for the forthcoming blocks. Further, one way takes you to the art block, and the other way leads you to Jiddu House to the left, and Holt Center to the right, and Auroville further ahead. That are all classrooms for various batches. The library is placed further beyond the art block. The next sheet explains the landscaping features incorporated in the design, where the vegetation is included as an integral part of the built form. The perforations in the boundary walls running throughout, pathways that have been delicately designed, open seating areas, and other various playful elements indicative of children's space. The key plan here demarcates the clusters that we have considered as per function for defining the order of sheets ahead. So the first is the admin block, which includes outhouse near the main site entrance, and Sangama, which is the first block after passing through the horseshoe arched entrance. Then there is the academic block and art blocks accordingly. So as mentioned, the outhouse is the administrative office of Pupil Tree Undergraduate College. It has a staggered planning, keeping in mind the climatic aspects of the region, ensuring visual connectivity. Then coming to Sangama, which is the administrative block for primary and secondary sections. It is a G+1 structure which has two diagonally placed courtyards, ensuring venturi effect and visual connectivity through perforations on walls. There is bamboo pergola outside the toilet, which protects from harsh sun rays. One part of the structure opens up into a pond, and the other courtyard has idols of various deities to keep the students abreast of the traditional and local culture. The Jiddu and Holt Center. So the structure is well designed. The space and volumes itself speaks about its users while responding to their scales and proportions. The toilet block over here has been incorporated with internal courtyards. It with jali walls for cross ventilation. Then the toilet block is right next to the Auroville, the classroom block, which is there. So Auroville, it's an academic section for classes 7 to 10, and the plan of Auroville is symmetrical with two main entrances. It consists of a centrally located courtyard and walkways running along its axis. It has a freestanding arch towards the rear entry. Then there is the library block. So library is located next to the art section at some distance from the main academic block, and the plan of the G+1 story library comprehends a decagonal shaped roof room functioning as a communal reading space. Right in front of the library, there is covered seating spaces along with water body, with the Nandi bull idol placed centrally, keeping the cultural aspects intact.
You have 2 more minutes, please wrap it up fast.
Coming to the art block, it is a dedicated space for curricular activities for dance and music. So complements its function, the structure is designed in organic pattern that exhibits fluidity and rhythm. So there are various traditional paintings and kolam rangolis are on the circular walls. So, and also the curvy roof shows intricate details in construction with the materials they have used bamboo and woven chatai, which is local to the region. There are open amphitheaters and dome for informal gathering into the spaces. Next, canteen. So canteen, so this canteen block is in the middle of the site and is easily accessible. The circular room, as the plan, has courtyard in the center, which are adorned with variety of flora and fauna, with lots of small openings on the roof of this to ensure ambient lighting into the structure. Coming to the next part is the Sarvapalli. So Sarvapalli is a high school block high school block. It is G+1 structure, and it is linear with individual units connected linearly with courtyards in between. In spite of being built with RCC and brick, the overall composite structure still complements seamlessly with the other structures around. And coming to this sheet, so this sheet speaks about the strip section of one of the Auroville structure. So you can see the materials which they have used. The 2-layer thick construction has been used to provide thermal insulation, like the stones, and perforated windows and jalis are used for cross ventilation. And the upcoming sheet talks about the construction methodology and the types of windows they have used in the structure, with various types of segmental arches, circular arches, and the various types of windows. Next,
this is one of the pergolas near the entrance of the site, incorporated with seatings as a landscape feature. And we have the construction detail of the horseshoe arched entranceway that we were talking about. The conclusion, a structure is responsive of the local climate and context and evolves with time, is what can be termed as a wise design. And the Pupilry Academy is one such school which sets an example by the sensitivity with which it fulfills the needs of the place and its inhabitants. It aims to bring back the essence of the bygone, physicality, culturality, and sentimentality. These are the photographic panels. Thank you.
Yeah, Brinda, can we start?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, guys. well presented. The photographs are pretty much kind of, especially what I see on the screen right now is showing the context strongly. There's a lot of greenery. And you didn't talk too much about the landscape as such within the campus itself. And I was wondering like how that would have also affected the design in a way. And I would hope you could clarify a little bit on that part. And as we know, Bellary is in a very hot climate, hot and dry. If you could have actually taken a little bit more kind of done an in-depth analysis of how the openings and the shading structures were used with a much more direct reference. I know you did mention a few of them, but a more direct reference to how they were responding to light and the ventilation aspects, and particularly the greenery.
So talking about
You can respond after everyone gives you comments. Yeah.
Okay, let's see this. First, you have taken a particular typology where you want to actually show what is this infill kind of thing. So first is how it responded to your local building traditions, which because the kind of form it has shown, and as Brinda suggested, one, there are enough existing trees, and how that has actually helped the guidance of or the evolution of the design process. That is number which I think you should be harping much more. Then why there are different shapes and sizes and things that has been adapted. What is the logic behind? Because if you are really trying to show how it is responded to the local building traditions, so that is not really come about, because there are various kind of experimentation. That is fine, but how you really modernize that. Second, this is a school, so there is a school philosophy as well. So how that philosophy is also reflected, or the designers have tried to reflect it that in the design process. You should, because you should take it as almost a learning exercise. So these are the kind of things that I would like to really see and reflected on, that the kind of design choices that has been made, and how that really fits with the contextuality or the infill process. So I think those are the starting from the large site planning to the really in terms of detailing would have been a better exploration. So that is my take.
Ma'am, you are not audible.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Why so many different forms? Also, there are different kinds of slats and whatever they've put in some urban material to also insulate it, etc. would have been better, and more visuals of the local context would have also helped. We saw the sketches of some other high-rise buildings, which is not, which is out of context. But whatever is the traditional typology, if you could have shown that, that would be good. Did you visit, or this is only from the net and from the academy?
We have visited the site, ma'am.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay. Then somehow these buildings on the other side with concrete bands and exposed brick. Is it exposed brick?
Yeah.
Or is it that plaster, colored plaster?
It's exposed brick.
It's exposed brick. How does that work in that region, and what is the kind of rainfall that you have? Because in Ahmedabad, we are already conserving and restoring Louis Kahn buildings and SEPT and all that, just because they have been kept exposed. And no
So-
longer do we get the bricks that were made more than 100 years ago, which the Gujarat College is. And nothing has happened to those bricks. But what we get in present times, we have had to restore, renovate, refurbish these two buildings at very, very high cost. Much higher cost than what we generally do in restoration of old buildings which are 800 years old. These are hardly 30, 40-year-old buildings. So even questioning in that direction is required. You know, what is the temperature difference between the two? I mean, morning, evening, morning, night, and during the seasons. And when it rains, what kind of rain? Is it a lashing rain, or is it, and what does it require? Does it require shades like verandas? What was that traditional typology?
Oh.
Thank you.
So speaking about the climate of this region, so it falls in a semi-arid region. And talking about the materials they have used is stones and other things. So stone is double layered, like it is thick. So during day it is harsh, so that the stone helps in keeping it cool, like keeping the structure cool during the day and also warm during the night. And talking about the exposed bricks, so these are exposed brick with a plaster with mud walls. So that helps in cooling the interiors during harsh rays also. And the planning in such a way that they have incorporated different type of courtyards which responds and helps in cross ventilation. Like there are courtyards with trees, there are courtyards with ponds also, like, so that affects, like that helps in keeping the microclimate cool of this region. So in this image, like Auroville, which you can see, so this is the exposed courtyard with trees around. And in the next structure, like in Sangam, so there are ponds with water intact. So these various elements helps in keeping that climate cool. Like if you can see that the courtyard, so there are vegetation also, so that these various aspects helps in keeping the climate cool. And also various shading devices talking about, so there are various pergolas at various spots at the site with various vegetation which are local and which responds to the climate. So the vegetation which they have used are the scanty bushes which survives this climatic region, like the bougainvilleas. So the bougainvilleas also act as a gives aesthetic appeal, as also provide shade at various points. And also the pergolas which they have used in such a way that at various points, so this pergola seating which you see, so this is an indicative of this is an indicative of another block which we are entering. So the pergolas are also designed in such a way that it represents the function of the space which we are entering into. So this horseshoe arch represents that we are entering into the another like primary student block, and at the very great entrance, that is the pergola which shows that this is the main entry. So the display of pergola with vegetation around, and also it is acting as a landmark which we are entering into different spaces. That is one thing. And the jalis also, the use of jalis, there are two functions. One is for cross ventilation and lighting, and also there are niches, so that in these niches they put small idols which reflects their culture, and which is used to keep the children aware of the local traditions. And also on the floors which you see, so there is play of materials in terms of various aspects. So in terms of flooring, so the floorings are designed in such a way that they are made with which shows a resemblance of rangoli, which I mentioned. Like the medium of rangoli has changed. Like they have used rangoli patterns in terms of studded stones. The medium has changed, but still that relevance or still the culture still reflects. So the medium has changed, but still that they are trying to keeping it
stop
intact.
now.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Could you have
That
gone
was
into those
the
steps?
thing to share. Yes.
Yeah.
Next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be going on to the next LIK 11 entry can now present.
Yes.
And asking participants to kindly.
So, good morning, everyone. This is the L.I.K Group 11, and we're here to talk about Bright Horizon Academy, also known as Hilltop School. It's an educational institution of 1,200 square yards, and it's in the Golconda Fort area of Hyderabad, Telangana.
Same thing.
And it's, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. So the architect of this building is Tagbir Fatima of the Designerware Studios. Now, the reason we took this building, there were primarily two reasons. One was the immediate surroundings of the building and the site itself and the culture around it. And second is how the area has a historical impact. Yeah, so the historical significance. The site is located 800 meters away from Golconda Fort, which was at first, so Hyderabad was built off of the banks of River Musi or River Musa, and Golconda Fort back then, it was known as Gollakonda, which used to be a shepherd's hill or like a place where cattle was reared. And after that, there was the Golconda Fort built, which was, of course, to prevent the whole Hyderabad state from invasions and all that. And because of this, after that, there was also like Golconda Fort was used as an area for like storing diamonds and even the Kohinoor. So this in turn developed the area around Golconda, and it became famous for tourism, and it became a business hub of that region at that time. At the moment, it is currently it's just a high density, low rise area, mostly filled with residential buildings. And yeah, so the few buildings, the few monuments around which Hyderabad was had its development was Qutub Shahi tombs and the Golconda Fort, which are both very close to the site. In this slide, we can see that the Qutub Shahi tombs is 1 kilometer to the northwest of the site, and Golconda Fort is 800 meters to the southeast, which makes our site almost exactly in the center. And so coming to the immediate neighborhood and the road network patterns, this is a site, and the roads of this area are around 4 to 5 meters wide, and there's a primarily use of vehicles such as two-wheelers and sometimes autos. These roads again subdivide into 2 meter wide roads. So this was the main entrance. The 4 meter wide road is the main entrance to our site, which this narrow patch is one of the main entrances. From the side, there's again a 2 meter wide road, which is a side entrance. So through this, we can see the whole density pattern around our site. This was the initial narrow entrance. So since our site in itself through the length has around 11 meters of contours, so it has a lower ground level, which is the narrower part of the 4 meter wide road, and the 2 meter wide has the entrance to the upper ground level. So the whole building is placed on like this contour without flattening out the land. So there's two entrances to it. Yeah, Vaishnavi will be taking over from now.
You're not audible. Please unmute yourself.
The project had two main constraints. The first, as it is a charitable school, it has to be a low budget school. And the second, the site itself. The site was having a very steep contour and boulders in it. Next slide. The site plan is divided into 3 levels vertically. The top level is having a existing old school and a mosque and 3 existing very big trees. And the middle part of the site was covered with a steep contour and soil and boulders. And the lower part of the site was having a narrow part with an old courtyard house. Next one. Unlike the other buildings, this building was having a lower floor plan, middle floor plan, upper floor plan. In lower floor plan, the architect wanted, there was an existing courtyard house, so the architect wanted to continue that, got inspired from courtyard, and she wanted to create an courtyard throughout the building, going all 3 levels. So she created a staircase connecting, seamlessly connecting all 3 levels. And on the first floor, they have 2 classrooms. Initially, they planned for 4, but they couldn't because they got hit by the rocks. So they stopped there. And in the middle floor plan, the staircase continued with an atriums to the middle level, and with the classrooms on either side. And the front part is having an administrative area, and the bridge is connecting front part and the classroom area part. Even as they lost the 2 classrooms in the lower floor plan, they have planned and excavated the extended classrooms on left side. Next slide. In the upper floor plan, it was pretty much open to the sky. It was having a very big playground and a basketball court, and it's having 2 classrooms, a storage room, and in the front part, it was having it's a service part with water tanks, and it is also having a perforated concrete wall, which brings out the cool breeze from the north and light into the building. The atrium is kind of giving life to the building by bringing the light and air into the building. The facade is pretty much simple. It's mainly plain and with the openings. The street was having a pops of colors, so the architect decided to give pops of colors throughout the building. She used like bright yellow, blue, and red and green, primary colors mostly. Next. In the section, it was a pretty much interesting section. On the first day, we entered the site from the second entrance, that is from the top of the building into the top terrace of the school to the building. As we standing from in the playground, we could see the Golconda on behind us, and we could see the whole city right beneath us, and we were able to spot Qutub Shahi tombs and Lanko hills. We were getting we could see the pretty much view of the city, and we entered the building. It's pretty much narrow, and we could sense the light, how the light is interventing the building spaces. And the second day, we entered the building from the main facade, at the main entrance. As you enter, we saw a double-heighted atrium, and then we followed the staircase. At each staircase, we got a different level ups and downs. It was pretty much interesting. Like, we could feel the warmth as we entered the building, inside the building. And here you can see in the 3D view how the light is playing in the building. Next.
Please wrap it up in 2 minutes.
The boulders, it's a main entrance. The boulders were jetting out of the walls, and it was giving life to the building. Next one. And these are some of the renders. And these are the axonometric views and exploded views of the building. Next.
So coming to the SWOT analysis, the strength of the building, of course, was that it proposes a unique solution without flattening out the complete land, and because there wasn't really much choice with blowing up the rocks, either because of the budget constraints and the closely packed neighborhood. And it does respect the environmental aspect of it. And the ventilation was given here uniquely, because most of the houses here are very densely packed, and they're not very well ventilated. So to bring light in from the above, not only in the atrium, but also through one of the sites which had a shared wall, they put a 1 meter buffer, and hence they got the ventilation from above. The weakness was that some of the floors, the light wouldn't penetrate through the corridors as well as they would have thought. And there's no washrooms provided on the upper floor either. And
Sorry to interrupt you, but then you have to conclude fast.
okay, so the opportunities were that the area over there, they many people would want to go to a school like this, and the monthly fee was also very little. The threat is that it's extremely close to a heritage site, like the monuments over there. And these are the drawings we made on site, and yeah, these are the pictures we took. Thank you.
Thank you.
Parul ji, can you start?
Visited the site.
Are we done with the presentation, students?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Parul ji,
Yeah.
can you start?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, can someone log me into the other device? Okay. Anyway, can you hear me now properly? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You visited the site?
Yes,
Then
ma'am.
why don't we
Why?
have colorful pictures, which would have explained about whatever you said, the colors that we can use inside the building,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yes.
Secondly, just in general, you've done a good study, but why do we always think that they should have, broken down the rock, or it was, if they had the money, they would have broken the rock? Did they do that in all our traditional buildings in the Golconda? Just minimum cut was used, or minimum fill was used, and yet they were able to build. And if they had used the same material that I'm sure they have leveled some part. They could have used the same stone material, which would probably last them for many years, many hundred years, the way Golconda Fort has lasted. So how do you connect it, not just with the houses, but with also the historic site? How do you think the architect could have connected this building, or could have shown some aspects of it to the students who are coming there? So there is some connectivity with your heritage. If you could, ponder on that yourself. And only if they have put light well only on one side, couldn't they have done that on other sides as well to bring in more light? Or was there that much restriction around? And it could have only reduced their central court a little. I would like you to question these things when you are analyzing a building. Okay, next. I'm through.
Anjan?
I have a very simple question. Why you have chosen this particular site? That's number one. What really you are looking at or questioning or try to read this particular building? And what do you think the main design agenda for the architect to look at? And in that kind of search, what are the elements that you really would like to study? That's it.
Okay. So I also have a couple of questions. While I appreciate the fact that you had your site sketches and you also mentioned a little bit about your experience having stood over there and then looked at the rest of the town. So kind of giving a contextual reference from the visual perspective, and how that particular site and the building itself is in a very prominent location. But what I found a little lacking was your response, or rather explaining the building in connection with the people who are going to be using the building, that is the school children, and getting a little more connectedness between how each space was designed for specific functional use in relation to the contextual references of how light came into the spaces. So activities, the program, and connecting it to the design would have helped a little bit to make it more clearer. And also when you were talking about the larger context, you started with the city, spent a lot of time talking about the city itself, and then you straight away jumped into the building and did not really get into the adjoining context, the immediate context of the building. So a little more detail on how that building was sitting almost adjacent, and the adjoining buildings, how they were actually interacting, maybe a cross section that would have shown the adjoining buildings in connection with this particular design and how it was correlating. That would have been a little more useful.
Can we start answering?
Yeah.
For the first question, the elements that could have been incorporated in this building, of course, was the stone material, because when we went to the site, we started seeing some kind of defects in the concrete itself. And we would say that whatever rocks they did have, whichever they could use, they didn't really do that. And maybe we get that the architect's approach was more modern here, but we would have liked to see a little more of like the motifs or some kind of history. But again, coming to the exact neighborhood of the site, it was basically 2 courtyard houses which were placed here and here, and they were 100-year-old. Currently, again, they've been completely built over. They aren't exactly courtyard houses anymore, but that's what the whole building was inspired from. And the reason we chose this particular building was, one, because we wanted to study how a school would be made with enough ventilation for the students in such a dense neighborhood. That was one of the reasons. And again, the whole site contours was also very interesting to study. As Vaishnavi mentioned before, entering the site through both the levels was a very different experience. The topmost floor with all the activities had, this was a more very active zone. And while entering it, we had a completely difference. We came from like an extremely active zone to a more quieter and calmer zone, while through the narrower entrance, we had a more in to out experience, because there were many more indoor activities going on in the middle floor and others.
And the children, the kids over there were mostly from the neighborhood. They got in the old school, they were mostly used to learn informally, like under the trees or in the open area. So they retained those trees, and they've created different steps for the seating area. Even in the top floor, they were having a series of steps, and even in the middle floor, there were steps in the classroom, inside the classroom, and right after in front of the computer lab. So the children started using these places in a very unpredictable manner, like very informally, and they were having fun using the whole school building.
They would actually even climb on the rocks which were present over there, because, yeah.
Okay.
Mentioned in like you were sculpting the rock.
We couldn't hear you, ma'am.
Okay. If the architect had been that sensitive and done something with the rocks which children could interact with, you think it would have helped?
We think that she has already incorporated it as of now, but
has she kept them just the way they were, or has she?
She's kept them the way they were, exactly, and like she's just some of the classrooms have boulders.
Most of them having a informal, like a very plain seating. So these children, these kids are used to climb the boulders and play with along. And I felt these boulders are giving life to the building, like giving more sense to the building.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all.
We'll be moving on to the next entry. Akhil, please add them.
They have been added.
Yeah, okay. You guys can present.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
I hope we are audible.
Yes, you're audible.
So a very good afternoon to all. When our team sat down to discuss the requirements of the brief, some of the major points which we took into consideration were the site context and its connection to the grassroots, along with which we kept in mind the infill aspect of the project as well. So when we talk about Indore in Madhya Pradesh as a city, the first setup of cotton mills in Indore led to industrialization and urbanization, and that is what helped develop or construction Indore Development Authority or IDA, which is the building which we've chosen for this study. And this graphic represents how over time this cotton mills is what the source or what makes it is what weaves actually the fabric of Indore as it is today.
So setting up of the Malwa mill by Tukujra Holka in 1800s brought in more employment and urbanization accelerated. So when people started migrating for better jobs and livelihood, the requirement for educational and residential facilities also became an important aspect. The Maharaja Tukujirao III invited Patrick Geddes from UK, who was a city planner during 1900s, for a better plan layout. Under his master plan, he proposed educational centers, residential areas, and commercial zones along with a ring road. Western Indore comprises with cultural heritage structures like Rajwada and olden Maratha Chhatris, while eastern half has been used for new constructions. These halves were roughly divided by railway track with itself. Was a step towards a modernization in a post-independent India. So, IDA is situated in a eastern Indore in Palasia, which is built in a year of 1990, was emerging as a new part of the city with Yashwant Club as the city focus. So it seems right to construct a new development office in this part of the city. Not only is the site context important before its construction, but how IDA itself form a context for a new construction, like Holka Stadium, is also an important factor. Also, when we talk about the massing of built, it visually comprises of 3 chunks of vertical blocks leading to different heights, which are surrounded by walled campus and lots of green spaces.
When we talk about the architect, Indore Development Authority was designed by eminent architect Achyut Kanvinde sir, who is known for functionality in his designs. So when we look at his other works and compare it to IDA, the building which we have selected, we see certain similarities such as the use of straight lines, simple geometry, and amalgamation of semi-open spaces with shaded areas. And a notable element in IDA is how the structure actually rests on pillets itself on the ground floor, which seems to make the building elevating. And this makes the ground floor a very suitable parking as opposed to the basement level parkings, which we see in most commercial or modern buildings these days. His focus, our architect's focus on human values is also understandable through the creation of courtyards in IDA. And more importantly, how he has actually used the courtyards in the building. When we talk about design principles, there are principles such as repetition, which we can see in the facade of the floors, especially in the courtyard areas. There is also a major contrast with the building. When we see the building as a whole, it appears as a mass, but there are certain user-centric voids, just like there are corner coffered ceilings, there are central courtyards, there is a porte cochere at the entrance of the building. So this also forms a very, very important design principle. And when we look at the whole building, it seems like a rectangular block, but due to subtractive transformation, it has actually reduced to an octagonal form.
So looking at the ground floor, a major focal point is a spiral staircase in the courtyard, which allows a vertical movement for a crowd. But through an open giving area, them the chance to look around and experience the courtyard on the higher level. One of also get a peek into corridors of the other floors while on these steps. One of a rectangular masses out of the 3 terminates at the 4th floor, opening the courtyard at a lower level. As compared to the others, column grids consist of supports placed in square layout, the 2 columns at each corners.
There is another notable feature, which is a triangular staircase, such that there are 3 flights of stairs leading from one floor to the immediate next, which we can see here in this section and this detail over here. This sketch denotes, and actually we can look into this image, and there are ventilation such as openings on each level for these staircases for ventilation, light, and even to look out into the surroundings. These openings do not have any kind of glazing or obstruction. It is just a simple railing, so the person viewing outside doesn't fall off. Another notable staircase is the entrance staircase, which is a single flight staircase. It leads from the ground floor to the first floor itself. It is 3 meters wide, and it gives the person who's entering the building a really grand, a feeling of a grand entrance, because it is accompanied by a porte cochere, which is 6 meters from the ground floor, and it is coffered in nature as well, just like this image of the sketch over here.
So floor area gradually reduces to a square-like form, while another vertical built ends on the 7th floor. Corridors run each floor adjoining the courtyards, which form a semi-open spaces where employees interact during their breaks. This also makes the corridors are well ventilated, as normally opposed to dually loaded corridors in normal public buildings. The massing of third block or 3 blocks is clearly visible in the elevation. Users of ribbon windows and the entire building was sit on pillars resembles the L.I.K philosophies. The windows run continuously from one column to the another column, not making a visual feature, but are also a great source of natural light and ventilation. The windows are recessed with no horizontal projection, making a plain facade.
When we talk about the terrace actually has an elevator control room along with a storeroom. So the view from the terrace towards a Kalpataru apartments, which we see in the site's context, actually gives a sense that Kalpataru apartments, which is a new modern vertical structure, it gives a sense that the apartments have derived their verticality from IDA itself, because IDA was one of the very first vertical construction in Indore. Also, the terrace gives a view to the Malwa Mills itself, so it kind of gives a sense of nostalgia that how the upcoming events from the Malwa Mill led to the construction and the need of IDA in the city of Indore.
So talking about the structurally, certain slabs are the coffer slabs, as you see in the picture. Other slabs are the two-way slabs. Windows are the old metal sash windows. Most of them are fixed windows, but some are the operable windows for the ventilation. Beam drops up to the lintel level, which seen clearly in corridors and courtyards. Circular columns used which raised from the pile foundation. These columns run throughout the building.
So on our numerous visits to the site, we have tried to sort of jot down the anthropometric measurements and try to study the column layout of the entire building. We also tried to sketch a few perspectives there itself to understand the sense of the space as seen in these images, as well as these pictographical representations. We also tried to study certain perspectives from the side, which made the basis for the sketches which we have incorporated in our study. For example, this is the view of the porte cochere that I was talking about, and these are the Kalpataru apartments and Holkar Stadium, which form the context of the site. And an important element or the aspect is whatever vertical transportation from a floor to the other is, it is mostly actually in open spaces. So the person experiences certain kind of openness. They don't feel trapped in a space while they're traveling through the building. Concluding with the fact that like similar to the game of Jenga, the taller the tower of the block is, it signifies a more successful game. So tall buildings over time have become synonymous for sort of like development. Tall buildings are a synonym for development. So when we talk about vertical development, it plays a huge role in city planning and eventually building a city's image as a whole. So the office of Indore Development Authority is one of the earliest vertical constructions in the city of Indore, and therefore the building has turned to be a focal point for the city and simulated vertical constructions even further. The introduction of IDA set the city to rearrange its horizontal structure into vertical ones, and thus breaking the horizontally conventional building norms which we have seen before the construction of IDA, and thus giving the city a new redefined image. Thank you so much.
Is the presentation over?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's back to Anjan, right?
I'm sorry, sir.
I think it is.
No, jury comment.
Yeah.
Is it me or Anjan?
It's Anjan.
Okay.
It's Anjan Brinda Parul. Anjan Brinda Parul.
Okay, fine.
ABP.
First is I'm still trying to figure out why you have undertaken such a study. So first try to see in what perspective you're really looking at, and in that form, how it responds to the contextuality, its culture, its location, and the living traditions are being responded to. Because it's a technical building, so Kanvinde must be having some kind of a design agenda, some kind of his climate responsive controls. So that is fine. But to that respect, how much this building has achieved, I would really like that from your documentation. So that is my take on this.
You're done, Brinda.
So yeah, I had somewhat similar questions. One has to do with when you spoke about the context, and actually you started off saying you tried to examine the context and see how this building works within that context, right? But I didn't see too many references through your drawings on how, particularly say, for example, the massing of the building itself that you spoke about. Was there a specific reason for that, the way the massing was worked out in relation to the context? Because there, you talked about a view, and you could see certain parts of the city, like sides of the city, the stadium and the other parts. But was this a resultant of the FAR or the planning regulations that were there at that time? Because it was one of the first few taller buildings. It must have been allowed in terms of the FAR, otherwise it would have violated. So was the massing a resultant of that, or was it a response to the context, is what I'm asking. And the second question had to do with, I wish you would have had a couple drawings that talked about how the street and the entrance to the building itself and the street level, a cross section that showed what was the response to the street. Because is this building sitting in a site and has greenery around it or open space around it, or is it? It is, right? So yes, you do drive into this building. And so what would be the contextual reference in terms of the street itself? Is there something that is like, why would the entrance be on a certain side? And you know, how did the transition? How do you transition from street to building?
One
more person, just hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
hello. Yeah. Did you also see it, since you visited the site quite often, was the building comfortable from inside, or you had to have AC? It was all air conditioned, or there was natural ventilation? And what about natural light? For it to be, I know this was designed in an era when we were all following modern architecture, like you said, brutalistic architecture style that he had. And how did, what do you think if it was more horizontal a building, how do you think the city would have developed then? And I think it is quite a large site. So did you ever think of how else it could have been designed? See, basically in India, except for North, courtyard plays a major role. And then we have so much of concrete, which heats up.
Yes.
And which is again a very short-lived material. And we make that concrete from lime, which can last for centuries and can become a stone. Right? So if you can also think in those lines and analyze the buildings, even for other students, I would like to, bring that point forth.
Okay. Shall we start?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. So as Anjum sir questioned us about the site selection, or why we chose this particular project. There were two major points which we thought were important. One of them was the building or the system, the entire thing to have a grassroots of its own, which we are explaining it by the fact that actually in the context of the city of Indore, people think that the Chhatris and Maharajas are what the history is. But the city, what it is today, the reasons why students come to the city of Indore or why people come here for jobs is the industrialization and the modernization. And the grassroots of that is actually the Malwa mills themselves, because that is what brought industrialization and hence urbanization and setting up of all these other services such as hospitals, residential areas, and things from there. So that is how we thought this building has a serious grassroots. And not only is it a part of development, but this is a developmental building itself, Indore Development Authority. So it accelerates developments, or it is what does developments of other buildings. So that we thought was a strong point for the context. And coming to the infill part, we thought that the building is located in Palasia area, which was the newer part of Indore. And in this part, at that time, when there were no other commercial buildings, there was this one building, which is Yashwant Club. And it was considered like an elitist or a upper class sort of a place. So a construction of such a government project in a new part of the city could have given people a reason to visit, the newer side, and brought in more people. And apparently over time, it would the segregation would blur out and the entire city would be affected by it, is what we thought. Talking about Brinda ma'am's question on massing, we did think about this actually. FAR may have been one of these reasons because it is a 9-floor buildings, and the street, in case of calamities and other cases, it didn't incorporate like a skyscraper sort of a thing. I think from the design perspective, there may be other reasons. For example, since these are 3 blocks, therefore 3 major courtyards have been able to be incorporated in the design itself. And therefore on every floor, like especially on the tallest tower, on every floor there is a courtyard, a corridor around the courtyard, and that is what allows ventilation into the offices near the courtyards. And the 2 floors which end on the top, the 4th and the 7th floor, which you can see here, these form terraces which are open to public. Actually, people here, especially the employees during the tea breaks or whatever, they come here and like during breaks they talk and just simply hang out here. So it also forms like a social point, I guess. We did a basic shadow analysis. So we thought that it is such a big area, the terraces, that at some point of the day, some area would be shaded. So for people to be comfortable in an open space, such as courtyard, such as the courtyard terrace, because in corridors are also open and ventilated, but they also stop the circulation of the building. So these are the places where people can go and talk to without hindering the circulation of the other users of the building. So I think that is how massing may have affected that.
So is the next question the current situation of street and station entrance? So SB building is situated in the corner of the plot, and the majorly 2 sides are covered with a fully built landscape. And this building is situated inside of a main road, and a side road was connecting to the entrance. It's not directly connected to the main road. It is in the side road was coming, and the side road was has an entrance, 2 entrance, 1 for exit, 1 for entry. And the next question was about the natural light and ventilation for the air conditioning. So majorly because as you can see in a plan, there was a large halls were created at that time. From now they were divided into smaller parts. So for this part of area, they have used air conditioning. But because we have a courtyard, we have 3 courtyards which are going to different levels, have very good ventilation and very good, a huge amount of light entering in building through the day. And we have also the recessed windows on every hall, as we can see throughout. And these are the longitudinal windows which runs from one corner to another, one pillar to the another pillar. So it's enough light for in daytimes.
Okay.
Looks like that answers the queries. Should we go to the next group?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is my screen visible, sir? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. You're audible.
And is my screen visible?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we can start.
So A very good morning. We are the representatives of the 64 L.I.K 23, and for this session, we have focused on the contrast that is drawn on the buildings that follow the anarchy completely oblivious to the site surrounding, and contextual features and a building that is not only responsive but is also efficient and contemporary, however vernacular at its roots. So for this project, we have undertaken the study of the headquarters of Development Alternative, which is a non-profit flagship society that is engaged in research and action and for sustainable development at local, national, and global levels. The organization is not only limited, but functions in the field of rural development and technology as well. In the site visit, we got to see that the building is already practicing sustainability, vernacularity, and green features. So what is asked in the trophy as a core requirement for the building of study is not just a part of the building, but the organization that runs it. And we have also mentioned the other organizations working with it and for it. The headquarters is located in the Qutub institutional area, which is not only an important cultural and historical center, but also is a part of protected forest area, and thus it provides other criteria to justify the building in terms of a responsive example to context and its settings. When we went to the site, we saw that the building being adjacent to Sanjay Van Park, considered the lungs of the area, are also highly influenced by as it almost all the views of the park, and indigenous vegetation is incorporated in the building, thus seem to be creating a completely new vocabulary. So the design of headquarters is based on the Nari Gandhi ideology, and it has a sharp contrast to the mainstream architectural thinking. The design incorporates the experimentation with local building materials and technology, and thus the development was largely influenced by local contextual features. So when we look into the building, we see that nearly a dozen of brick, stone, and block used in a variety to create patterns in walls, columns, arches, and domes were used. And as you can see, we have transformed from the concept to the actual construction of the area to make some new developments. The design and materials and techniques of the building demonstrate a fundamental alternative for the construction of comfortable, green, and affordable buildings of many types. The materials are selected solely to represent the visions of the organization, that is towards the sustainability and the site's respective designs, and thus it reflects local essence as an integral part. Some of the features like stone masonry, exposed brickwork, or the domed roof is thus prominent in the design features as shown.
So the plan of the building revolves around the features like the use of natural light and ventilation, as the landscape and the surrounding green space consisting of indigenous trees like acacia and epaulet, which improves the air quality and fragment of the space, is infused in the built space, which creates an aesthetically pleasing vista and also naturally cools and heats the internal space. Through the use of design principle like repetition and symmetry, as well as customized openings, windows, and pictures, not only is the aesthetical aspects of the building is controlled, but so are the views and movement within the building. Another interesting feature that is very prominent in this planning is the play of light and shadow. So in wherever the design is moving, the play of light and shadow is going on around with it. So, however, the building is a very formal kind of building. So it needs to kind of give that formal experience. And for that, some elements like vaulted precast reinforced concrete deck element or broken ceramic tile or these kind of brutal structures or elements are incorporated in the design. Also, one of the important thing or interesting thing that is incorporated in it is like the brick patterns and the coffered ceilings is somehow is used to emphasize or focus out the important spaces. So wherever there is important space, it is highlighted through these kind of patterns and in design elements. Now, one of the most prominent feature of the building is its facade treatment, for it is not only brutal in aesthetic, but also portrays how with a material like ferro cement channels, with minimal steel bars and chicken wire mesh, etc., the building was able to minimize the use of steel to about 30%. Similarly, minimal cement plastering and exposed natural material helped in reducing uses of steel and cement to about 30%. Again, the use of recycled mud used to create compressed earth block is another feature that brings out the building as a standard for responsive construction practices. One of the most important thing and interesting thing that we noticed there was the use of the earthwares in the facade. As we know that there is a park in the adjacent and it is a reserved forest kind of thing. So they have provided these earthwares where it is used for nesting birds and squirrels. So the site is not just a public oriented design, but it also is responding to the natural surrounding, and even the animals are considered while designing the building. So these are the sections that we have highlighted, and there are different elements that are infused in the design that we have highlighted here. Now, other than the building being very much responsive to climate, history, and traditional things, the building also has achieved a lot of green goals. And that too is not based on some advanced technology, but just by using vernacularity techniques and materials. So they have achieved 30% less embodied energy, and they have used 15% of recycled material. It is also public oriented design. That means the concept of universal design is associated in it. It is also a CFC free building, and it also commits to people, because it's not just a design that some materials are incorporated in it and all that, but the workmen and the craftsmen, as we see here. When we talk about unique and innovative construction techniques, were driven in the construction of building, which reflect the local workmanship and material in each of its element. The different type of jali works that is shown here, made out of terracotta screen blocks and reused mirrors, are an example of the same. Cobblestone cladding wall is used in the exterior to give the earthly touch and to reflect the cultural significance of the site. It is also reflected in the open courtyard that is there, and it is highly influenced by the Mehroli archaeological site that is in a very close proximity to the site, and the influence of this facade treatment is also observed there. Now, another one of the most important and salient features is there that there is minimal use of artificial ventilation, and that too is a hybrid form. They have developed that form and they are incorporating in the design. Another interesting thing that we are noticing in all the seats discussed before is that the contemporary styles and technologies moving all together in these works, but at the same time, the jali patterns, vernacular elements, the use of earthen blocks, both are going parallelly, and they are infused in the design to bring out something entirely new and unique.
So as we come to summarize the entire project, this documentation emphasizes that in an era that is highly dominated by novelty and heterogeneity in design, there is so much room for us to create something unique, functional, and contemporary without losing the touch of vernacularity. There is so much potential when we combine sustainable elements like functionality, energy efficiency, and green building typologies with vernacularity, that it gives birth to a unique typology, somewhere close to contemporary vernacularism, only more advanced, feasible, and rooted. In the end, we would like to conclude by quoting a quote. To advance, we need not let go of our roots. There is yet a way to grow to heights with roots so deep. We only need opt for it.
We have also included some picture that displays out the characters that we have discussed here. One thing that we noticed in the whole study, that the building is not like an alien structure that is standing in the midst of a forest. It somehow gives away the feeling that it is growing from the soil. It is influenced. The design is being created because of the site. Everything is influenced on the site only. As we see these kind of windows here, it is facing the direct sunlight. So in spite of restricting the direct sunlight, the window is inclined, and the indirect sunlight is used there. Similarly, these kind of features are also there, the open courtyards and other elements. So this was it from our part. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Brinda, would you start?
Yes. I actually don't have too many questions. I mean, not much to ask, really. I think it was well described, and the contextual kind of references were strong. If you could have taken maybe some of the details of, like you pointed out, the windows in the end, and some other such lighting details. You have taken material, but more so to understand the spatial quality of the interiors of the building itself from the perspective of how the light comes in, those details. Okay, yeah, that window
Yes,
detail,
ma'am.
you
Yeah,
do have it. Okay,
yes, ma'am.
right, you didn't talk about it, so okay. I think most aspects are covered. I don't seem to have too many direct questions. One thing is that if you could have shown us how people used the spaces, that would have been helpful. That's
it. Next. Am I supposed to be going next or Anjan?
Parul, you go.
Okay. Tell me, you visited this building, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you visited other office buildings also.
Yes, ma'am.
So what was the air quality here and what was your feeling when you were inside this, and what was the difference between the two?
So should we answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Anjan. I mean, that was because otherwise it's contextual. One has used, very sensitive piece of architecture.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm glad that you have picked up this building, because this was a major kind of experimentation that has been done in this period, where what should be the alternative way of looking at the building practices that is there. So I know this building very closely, and also I know the designers pretty well. I have used this building as well. So now I think it is more in terms of perception, because if you have visited recently, what are the things that you, if you could figure out, what are the things that doesn't work? Because this was an exploration of all the possibilities of the agendas that we look for and the agendas that they try to work out in a historic context, how to respond to that. It's a public building. It is also a building that symbolizes different development approaches, which are more human, more inclusive. So all these things has been tried. So it is, as Brinda was saying, it is the feedback of the building as to its performance and as to the things that has been propagated, that is will be of a more critical kind of a take on this. So I wish you could actually see it is in terms of use, in terms of its maintenance, and in terms of the propagation of this knowledge, that some things work very well, some things need to be improved. That kind of lacunas, if he could highlight into this thing, it would have been very meaningful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You can answer, I think.
Okay. Ma'am, so basically, as you talked about, Brinda ma'am talked about, she wanted to know how people actually use it. So how the building is functioning. So we actually have touched the topic. As you can see here, these kind of topics like open circulation. Every space is kind of planned in a way that the end user is experiencing something. It is not just a chunk that you go there and the end user's experience is ignored. When you are in open courtyard area, then you experience something. For example, this development alternative organization is a very interesting organization. It is not just a formal organization when people go and work on an office station. This organization is working on developing things, so these kind of requires kind of a space that can nurture that. So the open courtyard is one of the best example that works. Then these window features that are here in the details. as I talked again, it was not just to restrict the direct sunlight. It was because if the people is there, if someone is sitting there and the direct window light is there, and if it's hitting the person, for example, these kind of are organized in the formal spaces, so it will kind of generate an uncomfortable space. So to restrict that and also not to put that as a negative space, they kind of developed something on the side only. So they have inclined the windows and jali work is there. So kind of a indirect light is going. So light is there, but not direct. So everything which is going on here is based on how users will experience it. Then the air quality and feeling. So actually, ma'am, it was adjacent to the Sanjay Park. So if I personally live in Noida, and so I know what kind of industrial areas and environment air quality is there. But on a serious note, when we visited there, the air quality was much better. And also we went in at the time of it was daytime. So it was like seats was there. It was kind of felt like, yeah, I can relax here, I can sit there and I can observe things. So air and air quality feelings was much better. Now coming to the answer of Anjan sir, he has asked a very kind of tricky question. I mean, the architects that have designed are very experienced and all, but there are certain features that could have been better. For example, when we visited the main entry of the formal Jo gate tha, that was kind of like closed because we went on weekends. So if we had to go through, like we had to experience all the space, we had to go to the other day. So it was kind of restricting some spaces. Obviously, a formal space needs to be restricted, but also the length that need to be covered to go to the other entry. These kind of things are there. Also, they have experimented with a lot of things. For example, there is like this stepwell kind of thing going on there, which this that we have highlighted here. So we couldn't really figure out how it works out. It was there, we saw it, but we couldn't really figure out because the sunlight was hitting there. So these are few things that we thought could have been, maybe it was because of the maintenance that's not done, or maybe it's because it was not completely figured out in that better ways. So like 80 to 70 to 80 to 85% things are very much usable and very much functional, but there are few things that could be corrected or could be done in a much better ways. So this was my answer.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Can I stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
So now we'll be taking a break of 15 minutes and then we'll come back. Is it fine with all the jurors?
Let's ask everybody, do we need 15 minutes break now? Or can we break for lunch directly?
I think we should continue because
we should continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Parul ji, आपको mute.
I'm working from 2 devices, so I forget. I think after 2 or 3 presentations, we can break for lunch.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. So we would have completed.
Akhil, I would ask you to please add them in the meeting.
Yeah, sure.
So another 3 would mean roughly around 1:15, 1:30-ish for lunch. That should be okay, I think.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And we'll almost touch the halfway mark.
Yes.
Yeah. NASA has put that 10 minutes deadline. No, everybody is following it. So, actually, we should ask NASA to coordinate all our seminars, national seminars. Everybody has to follow time. How's the YouTube live stream going on? Has no, I don't know.
Yes, yes. It's
Somebody's
going.
coming.
Can they start now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some team is stepping in. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, is the screen visible and my audio is okay?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so we are representative of 64 L.I.K 28. So good afternoon, everyone, first of all. So the building we chose for the documentation is in the Kutch. So Kutch culture and value have been preserved in some way. Kutch has a particular identity based on its indigenous culture, traditions, architecture, local craft, ethnic populations, all of which are dynamic and distinct. There are There are particular craft and arts facilities in and around Bhujodi, but you can be sure that if you go inside any house, the building is working in some form of handicraft. This area includes the Ashapura Craft Mark, Shujan Craft Park, etc. So the building which we documented is Shujan.
The sound stopped.
You're not audible.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, resume, please.
Yeah. So Shujan is an aim to weave together holistic site, context, and program concerns to characterize an architecture that signifies a contemporary phraseology, which still being intricately tied to its local aesthetic. So it is a live heritage, meaning that people's lifestyles are still rooted in old practices.
A need to reassert the unique cultural milieu and the resilient spirit of the Kutchi people in the wake of devastating natural calamity provided the underlying subtext for the project. So the client brief demanded a sustainable architectural response, taking into the account seismic stability and the harsh desert climate. The flagship store for its products was to be incorporated in an attempt to create a new face for Shujan and provide a marketing platform for its wholesale international clientele. Yes, next slide. So it uses a vocabulary of large, continuous, sheltering, oak-colored walls, limited openings, and the profoundly shaded courtyard and wind towers to try to recreate the desert archetype. And the windscopes were designed to also as in structural anchors for the building, capable for taking lateral forces and counter seismic movement. And the architectural program required the spaces to flow continuously around the central north-facing courtyard. Next.
Yeah. So on the 20th Jan 1992, the building of Shujan was built. Before that, the site was barren with no built form. And there used to be only a stone building with courtyard in the middle. So due to earthquake in 2001, some walls of the building was demolished, and after then the current building was built. And it was completed in 2004. So as we can see in the below image, that evolution of the site, that in 2002 there was only small quarter and a small building with courtyard, and slowly it gradually developed and formed to a large building. Yeah. The planned organization required a harnessing and a prevailing breezes and concealing the work areas from the strong light and heat. And if we look at the vegetation of the site, that arid desert vegetation such as neem, coconut, mangoes, and so on, people, imli, gugad, word, and several cactus trees grow in the dry and steep zone. The two overriding features of the plan are inward-looking courtyard and enclosing walls with the wind towers on the south and west, So light in all the modulations was a constant concern brought in through recessed openings and bounced off gently curved and a sloping roof profile. So space is modulated in its proportions as one moves through the building, provide visions of the courtyard and the sky.
The overall master plan has three main components: the museum, the craft school, and the residential enclaves. The museum block was part of the first phase of the work on site. Its strict guidelines for conservation and preservation of textiles meant that the building had to be inherently thermally stable so as to rely less on artificial means of conditioning. This concern was followed right through the design of the buildings and became the core of the building design strategy. Next. Rainwater harvesting tanks were built into foundations to collect roughly around 7 lakh liters of rain yearly, which is used to cool the structure. The design aims to limit thermal gain by creating shaded zones that are naturally cold and can rely on passive cooling to save money on energy. And on terraces, the use of cooling pipes, that is radiant cooling, is proposed as a means of insulating the roof from the heat and achieving consideration temperatures throughout the year. Small exhausts were mounted in the circular barrel openings on the opposite walls that induce the required air exchanges for comfort.
The site area is 2 acres and the built-up area is 2,000 square meter, and the construction completion year is 2004. So primarily access is provided from the direction of the west, and the building has been given only one entrance to reach. The building is designed in a way that it creates a shadow in the courtyard and also protect the building from the west of the building from the direct sunlight. Thus, if we talk about the material, the sense of contrast is carried into the choice of materials and textures within the building. Rough popplecrete of the copings and the plinth contrast with the ochre painted walls. The building is designed as a combination of moment resisting frames and shear walls in RCC and brick masonry. In flooring, Kota stone is used in the interior because it keeps the temperature cool, as it can be used in the humid areas like Bhujori, Kutch. All exterior areas are paved in bricks. If we talk about the techniques, the positioning of the windows were such that it facilitates cross ventilation. Opening and the slanting window profile permits more daylight into the structure.
For the ground plan, it incorporated an expressive public face with its main retail store, visitors lounge, and exhibition gallery, as well as an internal workshop areas, textile design cell, offices, textile conservation cell, auditorium space, and residential quarters. A ramped corridor links the entrance to the visitor lounge, and the workshops and the cafe are on the ground level.
The two overriding features of the plan are inward-looking courtyard and enclosing walls with the wind towers on the south and the west. The protective walled enclosures on the heat gain side contrast with this open courtyard that coalesces views and movement in shaded presents. Workshop areas that require even daylight open towards the court with large continuous bay windows towards the south, which is here, and circulation is both through and around the court. The courtyard also offers a dynamic release of a space at the corner of a diagonal access to the main entrance, signified by tarred planes and a short flight of steps to access the retail store. The courtyard is designed as a multifunctional space capable of informal congregations as well as quiet movement space of repose for an individual.
We have 2 more minutes to conclude this presentation.
Yeah, just 2 slides. Next.
The functionality is the circulation is brought through the court. And from courtyard, a staircase leads to the auditorium on the first floor. Design department at first floor is accessed through lounge areas, passage, and the other access to upper floor. Also through the staircase at canteen side, which directly leads to the guest room on the floor, facing a terrace mainly used for drying the dyes clothes to the finished clothes. The building is surrounded to all sides of the courtyard, that centralized multifunctional space, which offers flexible release of space with view of the sky. The admin room and the trustee room can be easily accessible as it form a side of the courtyard parallel to the ramped corridor of retail store. The remote corridor also guides to the canteen area at the back of the building.
So this is the photo documentation of outdoor spaces of Shujan, that how it looks from the outside. And these are the photographs that of the terrace view, that from the terrace how it is looking, and some of the interior views. Thank you.
Arul, I think it's your turn.
Yeah. Where do you think this building could be once you look at the photographs of this building? It could be outskirts of Ahmedabad, it could be outskirts of any other city. What is the context? I don't think you even showed that much of a context. Did you study the old houses, the typology, the traditional typology of Kutch? And also, while you were studying this, you talked about the earthquake. Which are the buildings that were not affected at all during the earthquake? Have you tried to see that? Because earthquake is a daily occurrence almost in this region. And of course, the wind. You have very, very strong winds with the sand, like Jaisalmer. This is almost similar condition. So if you could highlight on all those, how that part has been incorporated in this, how the learnings, what were your learnings in the first place? This whole exercise is about how you learn about contextual architecture, sustainable architecture. They have, of course, incorporated many issues, but in basic, how do you think it fares with the context? These are my basic questions. And most of the, yes, Kota stone is cool, but traditionally it is the mud and cow dung floor that they have there, which is even cooler. I don't know if you visited any of those bungas to study that. That's it. Next. Next.
Anjanji.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay, fine.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Who is the architect to start with? This is number one question. So basically, then I could try and see how it is. I agree with Parul in certain form, because this building is a kind of a modern attempt to several issues of desertification and other things, because what are the other references? This actually shows a kind of a desert response. But is there a other way that we could learn from the traditional practices of the Kachi Bunga, that kind of construction? What kind of material they have used? in such kind of a situation and how they counter. And they also had a particular form, because this is such a kind of a compact but linear form. Probably they could ignore. So, but it's a kind of a design choice, that why they have actually performed like that. Maybe because of functionality, because the typology is very different. So here the major attempt is how you, in the terms of design typology, you invoke a institutional typology using a traditional system in place. Because there are some very interesting, like your wind towers has been used. There is a passive cooling system introduced. The space, shade, ventilation has been used. But what about the craftsmanship? And because there are many elements, as in your beginning slide you have shown, it's about weaving, and that is one of the major lifestyle innovations, which is a design manifestation. So how that is being also infused in terms of layering. So are we taking some kind of a take from the textile into the kind of a building design kind of practices? These are kind of study and exploration, because that is what L.I.K Trophy actually induces into getting into these kind of questions. But Parul has asked is rightly, because this ultimately from outside it still looks a very modern insert. But how do you really make it more kind of appropriate to its cultural and local context? That is where another layering of design challenge would have come. So probably it has addressed quite a many layers, but I think you could weave it much better in that sense. And in terms of sections and drawings and detailings, there are some kind of improvisations. So if you could really try and address to its closeness to the traditional system.
Anjan, can I respond?
Yeah.
See, this is one among the early projects of a group of young architects in Ahmedabad called Indigo.
Okay.
Parulji would have been knowing of them. And yes, in a way, you are very right. Their early language was what could be called as that, minimal, contemporary, etc., etc. And over the years, now Indigo has got much better name. Their own contextuality of architecture, in my view, I have not really walked into any of their buildings, but had an opportunity of meeting with one or two of their architects in some meeting, in some one of a Gubbi meeting or somewhere. And then I was interested. And also one of our student, I think interned at Indigo 3 years ago, I had called upon them. So now, incidentally, they are not so big in exposed brick or exposed stone, but they go a lot with earthy colors and a lot of emphasis on courtyards and scale and, massing and volume and all that they have further explored on. In general, that's the background. But I assume the recent buildings are even more contextual.
Yeah,
Over to students.
Is a good question.
Or to Brinda, sorry, I think after Parul.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I also forgot. Parul, then Anjan, and now Brinda, please.
Yeah.
See, this point the students may not be knowing. I noticed one thing. Most of them who have presented till now, they don't even mention the architect's name. Anyway,
yeah, and I think students should also mention the name of the building in the start, because it's sometimes they don't even emphasize that. Okay, so generally, yeah, I had similar comments, which was one was the location and how the building is responding to the location. A lot of description was and details on the response of the building with respect to the climatic conditions and the details of the wind towers and the shafts and lighting and all that was made, but the immediate physical context is what, as well as references to other buildings which are in the physical context, needed a little more study and analysis. And the second thing was about the community. This building is meant for a community of weavers, so very similar to what Anjan was mentioning. How did the spaces that were designed respond to the activities that were meant for the crafts community that was to be housed in this and to be working here, because typically they work in very semi-open conditions, outdoors, when they do, they need access to things like water for dyeing and all of that, right? So I wasn't clear, like this building, whether how well it responded to those kinds of needs of the craftswomen that were to use this.
So the kind of looms that they would use, depending on the kind of looms,
right,
the flooring surface will have to respond to that. And the lighting condition again, and how the mud, you get very spatial kind of mud there. We have done some experiments with it in Ahmedabad. And in this earthquake, devastating earthquake, these circular buildings, they were not affected, not at all. And we had 20 inches of rainfall in a few hours. And that time also, the mud walls or nothing was affected. So why can't we use, and of course we know that mud wall, and there is a chikni mitti that they have, which from which you can actually keep making shells. You can make storage units from that. And with the traditional craftspeople, you don't have to tell them when to do what. You just have to tell them what you need. And they will bring that chikni mitti. They will start doing what size of storage you need. They will start building on it, and they will decide whenever the women are free from plastering, mud plaster, they will do 2 inches in a day. It can only take 2 inches in a day. And of course, we know that mud buildings can be 2-storied, 3-storied height. And they have been experimented also in Vadodara. One of the architects has done that. And it's been working very well. So why do we have to use brick and concrete in a place like this where they are skilled in doing mud buildings? And why not the round buildings? Even your corners are so sharp. It only reminds me of Arizona architecture complex, what you see in Arizona.
Parul, actually, this is what is the major point of this study, because when they are actually describing the building, as well as they should really look into the actual building traditions, the materials, the things, so that this Indigo must have actually applied, but they were not really consciously doing it or thinking about it. So now we are in a position where we actually had this potential to really question those decisions and try to improve on. So we will always, actually, this is a giving a chance to really look in retrospect and try to chart out what the future direction should be in terms of the building construction, in terms of the materiality or the things that we need to upgrade our knowledge and then incorporate in the design. I think it's a good kind of exploration.
And how have they responded with the roof?
Right.
Roof
is one thing.
Terracotta, you have beautiful terracottas coming out of Kutch. So they could have also used the same techniques of inverted cullards, and you have lime available there. You have so much that local materials are there which have not been explored. And these are the things that you need to study and talk about.
Fair enough.
For that matter, some of the more recent buildings by Indigo, they do use exposed stone, exposed bricks. They do use more local elements. Anyway, the students have chosen a building for whatever reason.
What is the name of the architect?
Students, you please, this is not to question your select, your work as such. Please don't take it negatively. The jury was commenting at large on the design of the building also. Is also to help you, because they're also senior and learned people, so the crit would help you to rethink about what are you studying and why are you studying, and hence what you should do when you will be in one day practicing architecture. Take it that way.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that when you pick a building, irrespective of where and what, which building, don't take the building for granted. Do all the studies that are required to understand the building, and then start analyzing whether whatever you have studied, the manner in which the building is actually incorporating or not incorporating these. So that way, you don't start with the building, but you start with the context and analyze that and then apply it within. That might be more useful than taking for granted whatever has been designed and repeating what the architect may have said about the building without questioning it.
Very well said. And also, when Anjan sir was commenting about this, somewhere that's where I also stepped in. He said, of course, it's a very contemporary, clean line wala building, no doubt about it. And this is not to, from a jury perspective, we are not trying to demean the architects. Please don't take it that way either. So please don't think that, we jury don't like Indigo architecture work. Please don't take it that way. We are doing very neutral analysis of the building to understand, learn from that. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay, then we can go to next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, entry number 28. Now we'll be moving on to entry number 29. Akhil, have you added 29? Yes, team number 29, you can present. Team number 29. If you're saying something, you're not audible. Team number 29. Because your screen is visible, but then we're not able to hear you.
Are we audible now, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay, a very good afternoon, jurors. We shall now commence our presentation. Infill is an insertion in an existing context. From what the brief demands is that the structure should be considered towards its surrounding and also have its own identity.
Pune is a vibrant metropolitan city located on Western Ghats in Maharashtra, having rich socio-cultural, political, and architectural history. The site is situated in the camp or cantonment area of Pune. Camp was established by the British government for the military and administrative purposes. As Pune transitioned from Maratha rule to British rule, the colonial influence was seen in the urban region.
The structure which we have selected is the Pune Collector's Office building. It was constructed in 2017 and is a government building. The structure blends well with its surroundings as it strikes elements from the old buildings in the surrounding, which have local Maratha architectural and as well as colonial architectural influence. The landscape is largely retained, and it also plays an important role in blending the structure yet retaining its own character. It is rated 5-star by GRIHA, and many climatic considerations have been made to make maximum use of natural resources. Inspirations have been derived from local vernacular architecture, and use of modern technology is made.
Pune was a small settlement till the 17th century, and it developed majorly under the Peshwa influence. Today, Vadas, which are vernacular residential buildings and Gothic institutional buildings, represent their respective time periods. Planning, construction style, and visual characteristics are the crucial factors for analyzing these architectural styles.
The structure has been designed by architect Sunil Patil and Associates, who believe that architecture shall belong to the geographical location, culture, climate, and era in which it was built. They should be created with minimum intervention with nature and architecture which is in harmony with nature. Care for nature and people and society as a whole is a prime value reflected well in the buildings shown alongside.
Since this structure is a government building, we studied the importance of its function. The collector and district magistrate are the authorities which cater to the entire district. Compared to other collector offices in Maharashtra, Pune Collector Office is designed in a more sensible way. The site is surrounded by a number of mid-rise institutional and government office buildings, having large campuses and landscape areas. St. Helena School, Jilla Parishad, State Bank of India, Vijay Medical College, and Sassoon Hospital are immediate buildings adjacent to the site. Before intervening in the site, it had number of scattered office blocks, out of which 4 buildings were retained. A buildable area was identified, creating minimum impact on the existing vegetation. Functionally, the site is divided into office blocks in front and a parking block behind, with the block of collector placed above them. The structure creates a space for it and fits into the site. Site is oriented in north-south direction, with north and west sides open to road. The large landscape, pathways, and building blocks blend together. Collector office is divided into majorly 4 blocks, 2 office wings, 1 collector block, and 1 parking block. The office blocks are punctured with courtyards housing the waiting areas. The central atrium acts as a spillover and breathing space for people. The parking had the parking and offices are planned in such a way that one can take his vehicle directly to the floor where the office is located by connecting bridges. There are 2 cylindrical bridges connecting to office blocks and on second and fourth floor. The architect has removed some volumes from the building to break the monotony of the facade. These terraces act as spillover spaces for the people. The ramps in the parking have a shallower slope of 1:20, which are designed considering the user experience and user convenience. The office blocks and parking block stop at the 4th floor. The collector office is planned considering the importance of the authority. It cantilevers by 8 meters in front. This volume modulation makes the collector block stand out.
Many voids have been created in the structure to facilitate natural light and ventilation with the floor plate not exceeding 7.5 meters. Planning was done very judiciously and space and landscape was saved, and thus many open spaces have been provided in the structure, which usually is not the case in government buildings.
The articulated west facade adds a visual characteristic to the building. The frames also have a functional purpose to them. These views show how the stacked spaces are designed considering the function and construction factors. Collector office is in a sense a modern building considering the construction technology and materials, yet incorporating the regional strategies. The scale of this collector office required this kind of construction techniques.
The central atrium houses a porch, which is retained as a memory of the whole structure and as a part of heritage conservation. Vertical circulation, ramps, utility areas have been designed according to the demographics of users, and other amenities have been designed the same structure for efficient circulation. All the landscape is fed by 100% STB treated water, and the largely retained landscape and more native species have been planted, which reduce the overall water demand. Landscape has been reduced by using less hardscape with grass pavers, which reduce the overall heat island effect. Pockets of landscape are designed in and around the building in a formal way by facilitating user comfort. As a result of all climate responsive strategies, only 20% of the building is artificially ventilated. Vertical fins allow natural light and shade inner spaces and create comfortable environment inside. Glazing with different U values have been used according to the spatial requirements. Large atriums and courtyards facilitate natural line of ventilation. Overall, eco-friendly methods and materials like AC blocks, fly ash, and low VOC paints are used. Solar panels cater almost 100% of the total energy load. User comfort, which is one of the main aspects of design. And the architect suggests that in order to achieve that, one must struggle to provide those with proper justifications and reasoning. The structure compares in many aspects with the local architecture like jalis, courtyards, passages. Stones from the old structure have been reused in the new structure covering the entire ground floor. The elevation compares with that of Shaniwarwada, a historical monument in Pune, with the projection at the top establishing power. users, staff, as well as visitors have a very comfortable experience, and people coming from surrounding villages who have to spend the entire day have a good time in the landscape during breaks and lunch hours.
Architect Charles Correa seems to have a major influence on the designs by architect Sunil Patil. Apart from the works of architect Charles Correa, Sunil Patil also relates to the philosophy of Korea behind the Indian contemporary architecture.
Overall, the structure has a very strong regional and neighborhood contextual relation in terms of functionality, history, and landscape. Architectural language has been translated very well in contemporary form, considering needs of the current time. Thank you, sir. We're done here.
We'll start with Anjanji.
Well, it's a difficult kind of a situation. You have tried to explain the selection of this particular thing. So, because there existed a kind of an old structure, and this has been replaced by a kind of modern interpretation of the requirement, our district collector, because that is supposed to be a monumental building. And for that, also you have said the architect was influenced by Shaniwar Wada and all the compacted forms. So from those things, in terms of, so it is more of a stylistic departure, adaptation, rather than contextualization of the life and culture of Maharashtra. I think so. I am really grappling with the fact is, what do we take from here for developing a kind of a more appropriateness in terms of a design approach. I mean, that's, so I was really trying to look for what really is the inspiration apart from what you can learn from Korea or other things. What is the more contextual or appropriateness of this design approach? That is my kind of call. Next. Yeah, Brinda.
Yes. So I had a very similar question. I was struggling with understanding, and I think if you would have questioned yourself when you started looking at this building, you keep making references to learnings from the Shaniwar Wada, but I am not able to see through the way you explain the building, what were those connections and how it was kind of reflecting that notion in, how the design of the building was reflecting the notion of the Shaniwar Wada. The Wada is very compact, and the way it functions, the kind of the way the activities, the movement through spaces within a Wada, I couldn't see a correlation. Let's put it that way. Maybe there is, and you needed to explain it a little better. That was one. And then also with respect to the materials, I thought maybe we needed to hear a little more about, you explained the vertical fins and all of that, but what is the contextual reference and how does it work in a place like Pune? That was a little bit unclear in the way you mentioned it. That's it.
To me, just two things. Except for the courtyards, I fail to understand the rest of the building. Secondly, the way they have connected the old building to the new one, it's like you just added something onto it. You pasted something. There is no continuity maintained, or right? There is that part that they have retained. Am I wrong? Of the old building?
And they have retained a porch, which acts as a monument today.
Yeah, but then either, the way they have connected that to the main building is something one can't understand that connection, or you have not even harped on that connection. You've not seen that come through your drawings or presentation or anything. And that definitely, when you're talking of contextual buildings, it becomes very important aspect of it. And the fins, why the fins, what direction the fins are, what material are they made of? And if he has used the stone, where is the stone used? Where is the other part used? The climate, the changing climate of Pune. There is no longer that if the temperature went above certain degrees, it would start drizzling. The way it used to in Bangalore also, many years ago. Pune climate is changing a lot. So how does that respond, and how have they incorporated different forms, etc.? So next time you study a building like that, I think you need to look into all these aspects. The courtyards are very nice. Besides that, I don't understand the building, so I can't comment much on that.
Okay.
So the students want to respond to this?
Yes, ma'am. I have to answer the few earlier questions. So the elements which we thought were in context with the surrounding buildings were a few slides which we shown earlier. So there were most of the buildings had a sort of verticality in them, and so similar thing is the structure which we've chosen. And there were other buildings, so the structures were not taken, elements were not taken exactly as it is, but the inspirations were vernacular, like we explained, the fins were compared to jalis, or the courtyards which were compared to the courtyards in the local architectural style. And the stone, which the earlier structure, there were a number of units which were designed individually. So the structure, the stones which were used in that were retained and used. The entire ground floor was created using the same stones which were used in the earlier structure.
If there are no more, if there are no more comments, we can say thank you for this team.
So should we move on to the last entry before we break for lunch?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Parulji, okay. She's asking, can we break? Oh, she's saying after this.
Okay, okay.
All right.
So we have it as the last entry before break. L.I.K.
Yeah.
When you
Go
can
ahead.
do that.
Can we break for lunch now?
Yes, ma'am. Like we have no problem. Either we can have a entry and then break, or we can have a break right away.
I think I'd prefer to have a break right away. I have someone who's come for lunch also.
Okay, ma'am. Sure. So we'll be taking a break of half an hour or 45 minutes. Anything?
Half an hour, 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, 30 minutes is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
30
you.
minutes is good.
So I'll request the entry 31 to present after lunch. So we are breaking for lunch for half an hour and then we'll back.
Yeah. You'll have to again log me from another device, when we start.
Yeah, or ma'am, you can either leave the meeting open.
No, I'll have to also
Okay,
charge it and all that.
I'll admit. Just
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Also, Satya sir, I've mailed the marking sheet to all the jurors. So Once you get time, please check your mails and you can mark the entries there itself.
Akaran, can you stop the live?
I can actually present a poster for this half an hour because it will make more number of videos.
No, it's fine.